Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin, and we're here again on a lovely Sunday morning. And this is Turning Towards Life. And I think, Justin, this is our 199th broadcast. So we're nearly at 200, which is crazy and lovely. And you're very welcome here to join in this unhurried, spacious, emergent conversation on whatever the source is that we bring each week. This week it's a beautiful source that Justin's chosen, and I'm, as usual, completely enjoying this kind of already opportunity before we even get here to find our feet and to settle into a conversation that's unusual and beautiful. And Justin, thank you for being here with me.
So welcome, Lizzie. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm really pleased to be doing this again. And Lizzie, what you just said about the sources reminded me to say, of course, I've been living with this piece of text for a while, so it's been swirling around inside me. And for all of the rest of you who join us, however you join us, if you want to catch a sight of their source a little bit early before you listen to this, maybe you're joining us live on a Sunday, or maybe you watch on YouTube or on our website or on a podcast or something, you can always find it a little bit early, a couple of days before, by if you're a member of our Facebook group, which is Turning Towards Life, or if you catch our Instagram feed, it also goes up a little bit early there. And I know that I've found it really valuable just to sort of soak in the words before the conversation comes and not be just completely fresh at this moment. So that's always one option. And thank you everyone for joining us. And as we enter our 199th week, before we dive into this source and see what comes from it, the other thing I feel like saying is to all of you who are with us, you're so welcome to tell other people who you know about this project, because we keep on hearing from people what an impact it makes to be part of this conversation, and we're very keen to share it. So please know that if you know other people that you think might benefit, you can just point them towards Turning Towards Life, or towards the podcast, towards Facebook. We'll be so glad to have people join. And I think we have well over 1,000 people in our Facebook group, and it's the feel of having people engaged. Like, this is a big conversation, Lizzie. It's not just a conversation between you and me, it's actually a conversation between many. It's very meaningful. So let's get to the source for this week. And as always, Lizzie, I know what you and I can do is read the source and then see what conversation unfolds from it. And this is from an amazing book by permeates called Things Fall Apart, that I was first introduced to in a time in my life where things were really obviously falling apart. And it was so useful because there was great trauma and difficulty going on in my for some people that I loved, that was affecting me too. But I've been sitting on this little snippet of it for some weeks because, well, we'll see as we get into it, it's also about every day. It's not just about the times when something obviously big is happening, and it's called In Between. That life is a good teacher and a good friend. Things are always in transition if we could only realize it. Nothing ever sums itself up in the way that we like to dream about. The off-center, in-between state is an ideal situation, a situation in which we don't get caught and we can open our hearts and minds beyond limit. It's a very tender, non-aggressive, open-ended state of affairs. Things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. And it's just like that. And the healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy.
Life is a good teacher and a good friend. Things are always in transition if we could only realize it. Nothing ever sums itself up in the way that we'd like to dream about. The off-center, the in-between state is an ideal situation, a situation in which we don't get caught. And if we can open our hearts and minds beyond limit, it's a very tender, non-aggressive, open-ended state of affairs. Things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, room for relief, for misery, for joy.
Gosh, these words are such a relief to me, Lizzie. To keep on entertaining the possibility that this always in between state in which, well, I'm sure it's true for all of us, but I'll just talk about me, in which I find myself, where nothing is ever complete and nothing is ever quite how I imagined it would be, and nothing has fully arrived, and things are always departing, and everything is always undoing and becoming. Just to know that that's, to be reminded that that is the ordinary state of affairs and that there is no way to not be in this state of affairs is a giant relief, because so much of me, so many of the twists I get in, and particularly the sort of, when I find myself falling into what I might call unnecessary despair or self-criticism or desperation or any of those kind of things, it's usually produced by some story I have about a final state of affairs that I ought to be in. I ought to be this, I ought to have worked, I ought to have resolved all of these twists and shadows and, idiosyncrasies. I ought to be feeling secure and not to be worried about things. I ought to have, all my relationships ought to have been healed, and I ought to not get older. The drain at the back of our house is sort of crumbling and falling apart, and that shouldn't have happened. And it's not that any of those don't call for some kind of response. Of course, I mean, in a way, what I love about this so much, is so welcome, is not that Pema Chodron is saying, it's all a mess and there's nothing you can do. There's loads we can do, but none of it is going to stop us from being in the middle. And none of it's going to stop things from falling apart. And none of it's going to stop things from coming together again. And it's a huge invitation to me into participation, like knowing myself as indivisibly part of the flow of life, and that I can play a part in it because I'm a participant in it, rather than imagining it's my job is to be God. I think that basically that's the problem, actually, is when I imagine that I ought to have sort of divine omniscience and omnipotence, like I should be able to foretell everything and be able to act on it. It's mostly just such an inaccurate understanding of what life is. And one of the reasons why Pema Chodron's words are so welcome to me is I think that for many of us, the narrative we live in, the narrative of progress and the narrative of everything can be solved, and the narrative that you can do anything if you just will it, all points just to one end of this sort of polarity, the end where everything is okay, as a way to avoid the end where everything is not okay. And it's a fantasy, it's an unrealizable fantasy. So how about, this makes me feel so joyful, How about being in the middle of okay and not okay all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And to love the not okay as much as the okay.
Mm-hmm. God, I also find great kind of, I think it's joy bubbling up in the reading of this and in the encountering of it, because somehow it's a kind of big validation of the in-betweenness that I pretty much constantly feel, as if that's a place to arrive in. It's an invitation to arrive in the in-betweenness and to acknowledge that as a place of homecoming rather than a place of everything's wrong, you need to do something about it, which is a really different relationship to in-betweenness. And so, yeah, I too appreciate this reorientation, it feels like, out of all those destinations that you talked about, of the drain never having been broken or should have already been fixed. You know, it's like it's we're in what we're in now, and that can be an invitation to coming home, because we have that in us as beings. We can relate to things in different ways. I mean, that's what's so liberating about this reading. It's like, my gosh, yes, I can look at things differently. I can participate differently because I've read this. It just feels really simple and inviting. And probably what it brings up as well, more than that, is like a way of recognizing when I'm in those states, Justin, of like, this should be already something. And as long as I can see that, I can then invite this. So, you know, you were saying, you know, when all my relationships are healed, it's like a grand, completely unrealistic fantasy. And of course, it's like a safe making thing to fantasize about that, and that everything's okay with every single person and there's no issues and whatever. And then this invitation to realize that everything's always in transition. Everything's always in transition. My relationships are in transition. Everything is a process, an unfolding, a moving being, an undoing being. And that looking upon life now in this moment from that way, those things can now be showing me something rather than be something I need to remove or fix or get rid of or resolve. So it takes away this kind of feeling like you've got to do something to make it the end thing that you think it should be. So I'm kind of invited into a really different place of, oh, there's nothing to do maybe in this relationship now that I can't resolve because God knows what complexity, but I can be here and let it teach me something. You know, this first line, life is a good friend and a good teacher. It's like, what if a good friend and a good teacher is the transitionalness of life? And what if I relate to what's happening as a teacher or a friend? And a friend can be really annoying, and a friend can be irritating, and a friend can be all the things, and safe and loving and everything. But if I let my life be my friend and receive it all as some kind of maybe mysterious, I can't understand this friend and teacher, it's not to say that it's all okay and it's all fine or something. It's really not. But my eyes are open in a different way when I relate that way. And it feels like an opportunity rather than a kind of, oh, you know, I can feel myself be interested in what's unfolding. Even if it hurts, I'm interested. Even if it's difficult, I'm curious. It's like a different kind of opportunity arising because of this way of relating to what's happening.
I'm so being touched by what you're saying, Lizzie. And this capacity that we have that you were just talking about to have choices about how we are in our lives, that seems to be such a gift of being a human, that there's the possibility of being curious, for example, or letting ourselves be deepened by our lives. It's a choice that we can make, because we're not things, we're not in a fixed relationship, we're always flowing and unfolding. And the word that you said, that really, every time you say it, and you've said it lots in this long conversation, many times, this point you make about receiving our lives. Because I think that the other story, the one that Pema Chodron is trying to undo for us, the one where we have to get our lives together, and there's lots to be said for getting things together when we need them, right? But that the main project in life is to get your life together, is to arrive somewhere. It's not only so destructive because it's impossible, because wherever we've arrived, we find we didn't arrive, and that what we arrived at is already undoing anyway. So it creates a sort of an unfillable hunger in us, and there's a suffering in that. It's not only that's from the other problem is it puts us outside of our lives, because it makes us the ones who have to reach into our lives from the outside and make sure and get everything okay. I got famous enough, I got rich enough, I got fit enough, I got untroubled enough, I got loved enough, I got whatever our ambition is, whatever the nature of the ambition, puts us right on the outside, trying to, like, I sort of got this image of trying to reach in with long arms and manipulate everything around, which completely precludes the possibility that we might actually be in receipt of life, that it's reciprocal. And if it's actually going to be reciprocal, if we are both contributing to and receiving from life, it's going to not be the way that we want it often. Because the moment we demand that life is the moment I demand that life is the way I want it, I make that demand of myself or of life itself. I put myself out of the reciprocity, because now I have to be the one who's in charge, and life has to do what I want. And I can't receive from there. All I can do is to try and manipulate. So this single word is so pivotal and so powerful. What happens if we let ourselves receive? To participate in is to contribute to and to receive from our lives, to make change, because we do the moment we breathe or we move or we speak. The stuff is changing. We're part of that. And then to let ourselves be taught by life and changed by life and affected by life, because frankly, that's going to happen anyway. So can we be dignified, willing participants in life, rather than finding the nature of our participation, which we can't escape from doing, being primarily a fight and an attempt to dominate. Sometimes we're going to be dominated, and actually everything's going to fall apart. I mean, everything's going to fall apart. That's also the truth. No matter where we've arrived, it's all going to fall apart. Our bodies are going to fall apart. Our lives are going to fall apart. And it started happening from the moment we were born. It's not like it's going to happen later. It's already in train. So in a way, where I'm getting to is that our falling apart, the falling apart of everything we've made and we are making that's inevitable is actually just part of our living. Like that's what living is we're being made and dying all the same time. We're creating and being undone all at the same time. And it's just fascinating for me how the word, the distinction that you made about receiving is the one that unlocks. Oh, until I can receive, or to see that I'm receiving anyway, it's easy to get caught up in the illusion that I'm in charge here.
Oh God, I'm so taken by this. It's so joyful to me to hear you speaking, Justin. And I think this is why I love the work of, I don't know what we call our work. I don't know, looking at life or something. I don't know, like inquiring. But when I hear you speak, and I find that place in me that understands the relationship between control and receiving, there's such joy for me. It's like seeing clearly what I'm doing and what it's turning me into, and then having an avenue to inquire into something different, something deeper. It's just so excellent. I'm so grateful that you say things the way that you say them. And when you were talking then, I was thinking, my God, so receiving my life, which feels so meaningful to me, like actually being here and being alive and enjoying myself and being free and moving my body the way I want to move my body and organizing things the way I feel like it, and just being flexible and allowing other people to be who they are and not trying to basically strangle the life out of everything by having it the way that I think things should be in my small version of controllingness. Like, it's really important to me to live a life that isn't filled with constriction and tension and being tense all the time. I can feel that there's a life available that I could be that person. I really don't want to be. Like, it really is not, it's painful. I can feel in my body now, my whole body tensing up and being inflexible and kind of rigid about the way things should be is really uncomfortable. And when you were talking about basically control and receiving, the relationship between those two things, like I can't receive my life if I'm trying to be in control all the time, or I'm being controlling. That's how I heard it. It's just so exciting. It's an invitation out of what everyone has been being taught surreptitiously through life. All of us have been on the receiving end of, this is what life should look like. It's on all the adverts, it's in all the movies. We project it onto all of our friends and all of our family, or they've got their life together or they're sorted or something. And then we try and live up to some imagined nothingness that we created ourselves, kind of thing. And then we try and control everything so that it turns out that way that doesn't even exist. I mean, it's like in this moment, I'm feeling like the madness of it as well. And then the invitation you're talking about around receiving, I don't know, I just feel like it brings new eyes. It's like I can see the opportunity of life, just like Pema Chodron's saying, actually. I can see that life is good. I can see that life is a friend. I can see there's like hundreds of opportunities every day to feel free if I orient that way. And because there's all kinds of moments where I'm being controlling, I have all these opportunities to see myself and to go, do I really need it to be that way? And actually, in my experience, when I ask myself the question, do I really need it to be that way? The answer, when I'm really true with myself, sometimes it's yes, about certain things, but the majority of the time, of course, I don't need the car to be packed that way. Of course, I don't need Vespa to have her wellies on the right feet. Of course, I don't need to have things be the way that I think they should be in these situations. And somehow that opens up a whole different field for me of acceptance and witnessing and participation and taking up a kind of slightly frivolous space in amongst it all. Because often life is complex, isn't it? It's like, and I think the irony of it is it's like trying to carry sand around in a sieve, really. So to try and control things that aren't of the order of being controlled is a kind of futile load of madness. But I still try. I still try and have things the way that I want them, even though it's like sand in a sieve. So maybe I just put the sieve down and don't try and carry any sand and participate in a different way that's appropriate. to what's happening. Like it can just see how inappropriate it is to be trying to control things. It's not the things that are presenting themselves to me aren't, control isn't an appropriate response. It's not of the order of that. It's of the order of flowing and wondering and being present to and receiving my life and saying, this is my life. This is it. Right. This is it. Right. And this is my life right now in this moment as well. And there wasn't going to be another one of these. There's not going to be another one like this, Justin. Mm-hmm. This is it. Now. And to hold that wondering into the moment we say goodbye, and into the moment I trot off, make myself a cup of tea and look at birdies with Vesper. You know, it's such a I could kill all those moments really easily, or not.
Yeah, it was very powerful. It's also very joyful for me to be in this conversation. And I'm thinking of times in my own life as you're talking where really big unwelcome things have happened. Illness and people I love dying, and all those things. Financial circumstances changing, and the hall of the house being flooded by a burst pipe, and all of those things. And the way you said it just now was, maybe there's a different way, there's a different scale on which we can participate that's appropriate to the circumstance. So just having that, because I suppose that this conversation could in one way sound like it's like the choice between getting on with our lives and playing a part, or just giving up, which of course is not at all what we're talking about. What we're talking about is finding an appropriate, alive, life-giving response to whatever we're in the middle of. So whether Vesper has her wellies on the right feet or not is of the scale where it really doesn't matter. And that people have enough food to eat really does matter. So we can participate, we can do what we can, but we can also recognize that whatever we do will be of the scale that people can be of. So we can both, it seems to me that to participate, to be a participant is to be in the dance of giving and receiving, and giving and receiving. We can bring ourselves, and that so we've talked about this before many months ago. So it feels to me it's more like dancing than it is like ordering things around. It's more like play than it is like I can't think of what the opposite is, but to let ourselves respond in a scale that's alive to the situation, so that we can, because this is the thing that Pema Chodron says at the end, that there's room for grief, and there's room for relief, and there's room for misery, and there's room for joy. Can we let ourselves be in receipt of what's here and respond in a scale that doesn't kill it, that brings life, whatever life there is, to whatever it is? And for most of us, because of what you said about the narratives that we've been brought up into, for most of us that's a giant letting go of control, because the background narrative of our culture is you can learn to be in control, and when you learn to be in control, life will be exactly the way that you want it, and you'll have everything that you want, and you'll be whatever the current thing is, you'll be famous, or you'll be rich, or you'll be secure, or you'll be whatever. And so that's, for most of us, it's that end of it that's the big thing to let go of, is that I can't be in control of most of these things, but I can play my part. And that's the bit for me that feels really joyful. And to play a part is also to play, and recognize that an awful lot of what we do is actually by the nature of play. Play can be very serious, play can be very silly, but mostly what we're doing is we're playing. We have no idea really what's going to come from what we do.
Yeah. I'm so enjoying this invitation into the playing narrative, Justin. And I was thinking maybe an opposite one is to like be an engineer. You know, I can see my engineer narrative, my engineer story of my life is to kind of fix everything and make everything okay and make it work and solve the problems. And of course, as you say, that has its place when I'm literally trying to fix something or make something happen. But also, if I threw away my player at that point and I wasn't playing and I wasn't able to enjoy it, it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be an appropriate response anyway, actually. And then sometimes my engineer narrative is just purely inappropriate. So I'm just really enjoying your invitation to this play narrative. It feels really important.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful place for us to end, I think, this is to see that a lot of the time, many of us have an engineering kind of understanding of our lives. So I have to upgrade myself and I have to upgrade my life and I have to be able to fit all the different parts in exactly so they all work. And engineering interpretations are really good for engineering problems. I definitely want somebody to engineer how they build the house. And I definitely want to engineer some aspects of my life so that need to work like engineering things. Like, it's really helpful. But as a story for most of my life, it's way off. And that's why Pema's reminding us that we're always in the off-center in-between state. And can we open our minds and our hearts in a very tender, non-aggressive, open-ended way to what we're really in? So kind.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is what this whole conversation has been this last 199 weeks, right? Because it's not engineered. We've got some constraints. We turn up at 9 o'clock every Sunday and we've got half an hour and we've got a source. And then I think what we're practicing, Lizzie, is being in the in-between, being in not knowing. I don't know what I'm going to say and what you're going to say, and we're going to see if we can receive and give. So it's very joyful as we come towards our 200th time of doing this next weekend. So it's also a beautiful reminder that this conversation and life itself are of a similar shape. This is a living practice. And so thank you to you, as always, for being in this conversation with me, the longest ongoing conversation like this with any other human I've ever had the privilege of being in. And thank you to all of you who are with us. I'm so grateful that we're all in this together.
Thank you, everybody.
I'll see you next week.